Okay, I got the sign that we can start. I look forward to this session. My name is Mark van der Bigelaar. I'm working at Dow. I'm chairing the Disability Employee Network at Dow for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India. Working also with the ILO now for about 2 years. The session is called Company Practices Challenging Stigma and Stereotypes, and I'm particularly happy because we got some very big companies, or also a foundation with a lot of experience here in the panel. So we have Christine representing Orange, and if I did my research right, we're talking about 150,000 employees approximately, a very big organization. We got Anne-Sophie here representing Accor, and Accor has about 240,000 or more employees. Probably also facing challenges. I particularly would like to hear about how we can roll out, let's say, any actions against any actions for challenging stereotype and stigma in multiple countries through multiple cultures. We got Edona here representing the foundation ONCE in Spain, working within Spain but also outside of Spain. It's an organization with a lot of experience, more than 75 years of experience in the area of disability. And we got Yves representing IBM. It's also not the smallest company we have here with us, talking about 350,000 employees approximately. So we're talking about big companies trying to manage similar challenges regarding stigma and stereotype in the area of disability. So welcome to this session. What we will do is first go through some presentations of the different companies, talking about what they do in the area of stigma and stereotypes, where they see challenges and issues, what solutions that they have found. But I also would like to hear where we still see challenges and what could potentially be done about it. Before starting with it, I also would like to say something about a definition of stereotype and stigma. I think there's a lot of things that are maybe comparable with the two words, or sometimes they're even mixed up. So looking at stereotype, it basically says, looking it up, it's a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or an idea of a particular type of person or thing. So for example, somebody that can't talk, many people assume that the person can't hear as well. Stigma is a mark or disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. And here, for example, regarding stigma, I think there's a lot of issues we see in the area of mental disease, where for many people there's a fear dealing with people with a mental disease. That's typically what we would call stigma. So with that, I would like to start with the first presentation, and that's going to be Christine. So Christine, if all is okay, your slides should be up, and please explain in about 5 to 10 minutes going through your slides what Orange is doing. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to do it quite quickly if I can. Maybe just one thing. I would like to do a link with the panel that we had this morning regarding workforce and the evolution of work and the workforce due to digital tools that we have today, and the necessary evolution of the organization at work. What we believe at Orange is that the key issue for tomorrow and for the future is having the right person at the right place at the right time. And therefore, as we know that we have an international environment and ecosystem, we know that now today most of the applicants and the people we are going to recruit are mobile. They are moving from one country to another, so we need to be multicultural and integrate diversity issues within our HR processes and management processes. So I was quite, of course, I agreed with all the things that we heard this morning regarding the evolution of the workforce and the work and the definition itself. If I go to my presentation, please, next slide. I don't see it. It's coming. Okay. Can you move to the second one, please? Okay. Maybe quite quickly come back to what is at stake and important at Orange regarding diversity issues. Phil said this morning, the one from New Zealand is not there anymore, but that what would be great if it was if we could integrate diversity work within the manufacturing departments, and I totally agree with that. What is important is having everyone at work being aware of the necessary diversity issues while managing, working with your colleagues and in a collective and in a team. So we at Orange believe that the integration of diversity and inclusion is a very important approach if we are dealing with social performance and also economic performance. These are two things that we cannot dissociate today. If you don't feel well at work, if you do not feel integrated, of course you're not going to be as productive as you could be, and therefore you're not going to have a great contribution to the economic performance of the company you're working for. The consideration of diversity issues is also something that is very important today for us. And for all the companies that are there, I suppose that you would agree with me that in terms of image and reputational risk, it is very important to integrate those diversity issues and CSR perspective in what we are doing today. Also, we tend to have an approach of human resources and management based on diversity issues, and we have a lot of campaigns and training programs that integrate those issues and a link that I said between the social and economic performance. We did a huge study survey over the past 9 months. If you could move to the second slide, please, on the coming one, yes, with what we call a stakeholders dialogue all over our countries on diversity issues and gender equality. And the aim of this dialogue was to have the perception of all our stakeholders, both internally, employees, top management, but also externally, authorities, NGOs, associations, their perception, on the performance of Orange regarding diversity issues, either gender equality, origins, age, and also sexual orientation, but also disability, and temporary fragilities. And it was quite an exhaustive approach with all our stakeholders. And in the different countries where we went into Senegal, Jordan, India, Russia, France, and Romania. Disability is the top priority that all our stakeholders expect Orange to focus on in the future. And I think it was something that it was important to share with you today as we are dealing with that issue. The expectations, the very specific one on disability that we got from this big survey, is that it is very important, and we heard that this morning, to act in partnership with authorities and non-government organizations to work on education, because of course it is very important to have people with disabilities within your workforce, but if they cannot get to skills, this is what we said this morning, it's an issue. So we have a social a way of being involved in our ecosystems. So working together in partnership with the authorities, one of the expectation, to work on education of people with disabilities, but also on the candidate sourcing of people with disabilities, and some role models, because we believe it's very important. What we heard too is that it is very important to capitalize, and we heard that this morning too, on the use of new technologies and innovation. At Orange, it is a DNA to have new technologies and services that are very innovative thanks to our different networks. And the third expectation was to encourage initiatives in education to increase the pool of candidates. But among all the perceptions that were shared by the test stakeholders, what we realized is that there were obstacles still existing regarding disability and the integration of people with disabilities at work. And we could sum up that this difference can still create fear among people. And so that will lead me to the next slide, please. There is, of course, a need to demystify, I don't know if you say that, our work, and it is why we decided to work on the stereotypes, because you can say, well, it is important to integrate people, but as long as you are having and activating stereotypes while recruiting, while evaluating people, there is no way you're gonna have a diverse team in terms of recruitment. So we have many different programs today to raise awareness on the effect of stereotypes, not only on people with disabilities, but as a whole on stereotypes, on different types of possible potential discrimination, either gender, age, sexual orientation, origins, etc. And so campaigns and training modules to raise awareness. We have a dedicated training program for managers we call handy management in France with a peer-to-peer approach. Also in France, because of the requirements we have in terms of regulation, we have a specific module that we call Let's Demystify Handicap, and more than 3,000 employees were trained over the past years in France. And therefore, this year, we got to 6% of our workforce, that being people with disabilities, work in France. We have a training program on physical appearances and also on the impact of stereotypes and the risk of having them being active. And this very module, we added to that an additional contribution with some external experts, and some of the companies there are working with us on that test in terms of risks inventory regarding stereotypes. As I said, starting by the physical appearance is a great way to browse all the different types of potential discrimination. So this is why we worked on that. We, of course, have dedicated welcoming programs for people disabled in our different subsidiaries. And last but not least, we are about to develop an innovative virtual reality application that is called Ability, and it is as if you were in the shoes of a disabled person, meaning that you have a specific virtual reality helmet, and you can, as if you were in a wheelchair, you go through Orange premises with the different type of obstacles that a person with a wheelchair can encounter. Either the button of the lift are too high and you cannot reach the third floor, or there is no way you can open the door to go to the loo, etc. So during 4 minutes, you are going through a dedicated journey in a wheelchair, and it is really as if you were in the shoes of the disabled person. Should we move to the next and the last slide? Well, this is a focus on this application. So we have a plan to launch it on the 5th of December. Why the 5th? Because it is going to be the day that we are going to celebrate the International Day for People with Disabilities. Normally it's on the 3rd of December, but as it is on a Saturday, we're not going to have it on a Saturday all over our countries. And this application is going to be for also external people. We have a demonstration in our brick and mortars all over our countries, and we have it in 9 different languages, so that both our customers and our stakeholders and our workforce can test it and be sensibilized to what it is like having a specific singularity, I would say. This is it. Thank you.
Christine, thank you very much. I look forward to the app. I understand it's available for everyone, or so?
Yeah, on either your App Store or Google Store, or either with whatever phone, mobile device you have.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much, Christine.
You're welcome.
There's time to ask questions afterwards. Let's move to Yves right now, talk about the activities at IBM.
All right. So I know how challenging it is to run a panel discussion right after lunch. So I hope you won't fall asleep while I'm speaking. Please, thank you. So I will quickly cover 3 aspects of our diversity inclusion strategy. The first 2 A's, if you could move from one slide to another. Next slide, please. So we have, in terms of disability inclusion in IBM, we have what we call the 3A strategy, standing for accessibility, accommodation, and attitude. Given the topic of today's panel, I will focus more on the attitude aspect, so I will briefly cover accessibility and accommodations. Thank you. So on the accessibility front, as Cécile said this morning, it's a key factor to make sure that not only your workplace is physically accessible, but also that the tools that you use internally, whether it's a website or an application, are as accessible as possible. And again, the role of CIO is really key to make sure that it happens. And basically to carve it in stone, we created what we call a corporate instruction, standing for some sort of internal law, saying that all tools that are technically, that are made possibly accessible must be accessible. So accessibility is no longer an option. Thank you. In terms of accommodations, you know, it's equally important to make sure that not only your workplace is virtually and physically accessible, but also make sure that you provide the accommodation that your employees with a disability need to be as productive as anybody else. It's equally important. And of course, there's a cost aspect related to it. So what we did is that we created a cost recovery process. In other words, when an employee requires a specific accommodation, whether it's a screen reader, any type of, sign language interpreter or something, all the costs associated to the provision of the accommodation are centralized in a global budget. In other words, it's no longer on the department's budget that this kind of accommodation is charged. And that removes a big obstacle for managers having to hire or to employ people with disabilities, to welcome people with disabilities in their team. Next slide, please. So before we go into the details of the attitude one, make sure, please, that the first 2 A's are fully put in place, implemented in your organizations prior to hiring people with disabilities. Otherwise, the impact will be negative for both the employee with a disability as well as the employer. And it's so based on negative experience, I can tell you, it's not going to work. It's going to be a disaster. Make sure that you put in place the appropriate structure prior to hiring people with disabilities. Now, about attitude. I'm going to focus more on the managers and employee education. Coming back to one of the remarks I heard this morning about who should be the target audience within big organizations, I think that what we call in IBM the first-line managers, meaning the managers that do have a client-facing positions, that do have the business pressure, they are the ones that must be addressed in terms of attitude, making them disability confident. And so I created a 2-hour workshop that I run myself physically in a face-to-face in a classroom mode. If you go to the next slide. Basically, it's a 2-hour workshop. The first hour is really about me sharing the different cultural perceptions that people have around disability. I heard a lot of things about bias, etc., whether it's conscious or unconscious. I would rather talk about cultural perceptions of disability or stereotypes. And the second part of this workshop is more about interaction, about real-life experience. I asked the managers in the room to tell me, to share with the other people in the room, what were their experiences working with people or clients with a disability. You know, as you can imagine, the fact that I myself live with a disability makes my message internally stronger. I created an online version of this workshop, but honestly, the impact is much bigger when you do that face-to-face versus virtually. Although, of course, we can imagine the constraints related to logistics, etc., but in terms of efficiency, the impact is much more positive if it's run face-to-face, because we are talking about human experience here. Next slide, please. So, as I said, the purpose of this of this workshop is really to help people, managers, understand their own perception of disability, make them aware of it, make them comfortable with it, to remove the sense of guilty. There is no reason to feel guilty about anything, and make sure that they understand that IBM will provide them with all the tools they need for them to be able to work in an effective mode with their employees with a disability. So I'm not going to go into the details today of this workshop, but basically I share with them the three most popular cultural perception of disability: medical, tragedy, and social model. And of course, I illustrate these different perceptions with anecdotes, things that happened to me, because before joining the HR team, I was in the business myself, so I had a chance to be confronted to situations where I experience different cultural perceptions of disability having a direct impact on my humble person. And so I can share funny anecdotes with people, with managers, and they'll always appreciate that. And the last one is more an individual experience, meaning that when a person, which is especially relevant for people acquiring a disability over the course of their life, people who acquire disability go through a set of different emotional stages, and it's important for a manager to understand where these people are in their disability journey. And so I share, of course, some personal experience or experiments I had myself with them, and it's also very well perceived because they realize that it's not going to be a technical conversation. It's going to be more about the experience of working, the real life experience of working with employees with disability. And this is when we start the second part of the workshop, where I ask people in the room to share with the other member of the room. Of course, what is said in this room remains in this room. What about our experience? What was their experience living with a person with a disability, working with a person with a disability, having a disability themselves? What were the positive and negative impact? And I'll always try to show them the IBM processes that could help them in a very particular situation. These are, the following 2 or 3 slides will be about sharing with you some concrete examples, some key messages that I try to convey during this workshop. For instance, focus on the ability of a person, not their disability. My disability is not IBM's disability. I am the expert of my disability. The mission of IBM is to provide me with a workplace which is accessible enough for me to be as productive as anybody else. I am responsible for fixing the issues related to my disability. And so this is also a very important message to convey to managers, making them understand that my manager is not my father. My manager is there to assess my performance as a professional. I am not going to ask my manager to fix my disability-related issues. This is not the point. And this is also a key message to convey to the managers. Other examples of the key message that must be shared with the audience. Again, making sure that you establish a climate that empowers your employees to fully express their potential. And what is true for people with disability is also true for people without a disability. Make sure that all your employees feel comfortable in their organization to express themselves fully. One last point. I heard this morning, a notion of positive stereotypes. I'm not really comfortable with this approach. I mean, people with disabilities are not Star Wars heroes. Talking about the Paralympics, we heard about the experiment of swimmers, etc., which is good. That positions disability in a positive way to the public, etc., but from a business perspective, IBM is not going to hire swimmers or basketball players. What we look for is IT engineers, is IT specialists. And so be careful when you communicate about the value of people with disabilities. They are not heroes. We want to be considered as people. Look at us as person and not as a person with a disability or a hero. Thank you.
Yves, thank you very much, and I think it's a very interesting perspective and also great to hear that directly from you. And what I also like is that a technology company like IBM likes to hold these kind of trainings face-to-face. So sometimes there is no replacement for face-to-face. Let's move to Anne-Sophie. Your turn, Anne-Sophie, and can we have the slides for Anne-Sophie up, please?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you. For Accor Hotel, can you go to the next slide? The person with disabilities segment of diversity is also one of the key priority within the diversity. And why? It's because it's good for business today and tomorrow. And why? It's because we want to have the best people at the best place at the best moment. So this is for sure something very important. I wanted to say that in many countries, I can observe that the definition of disability remains at physical level. Can be Middle East, in Africa, but also in developed countries. But we all know that disability is not only physical, and that 80% of disability is invisible. So I guess that I'm convinced that we need to work on stereotypes, unconscious bias, and awareness on disability. The solution or the best practice or what we currently do within Accor Hotel against stereotypes and stigma, it's I take some example and some things that I thought can be very interesting. The first thing is to formalize the formalization of an inclusive diversity engagement, where the president, the sponsor, the commitment of the management is very important. And this is something very important when you are a big company and when you want to speak on this subject everywhere. So baseline, a statement to say where you are concerning the diversity and where you place the disability within the diversity as really an inclusive company. I would say also that the ILO Charter was very important also for Accor Hotel because it enabled us to speak on this subject in every country on the same base. So this is also one aspect that we need to say, and it's very important for the people to see what the corporate or the CEO is assigned as an engagement for the future. In terms of also people who work on diversity, it's not only the Department of Diversity, and what we thought can be interesting to share is that we developed a diversity champion network. You can go in the next slide. The diversity champion network are operational people, which was very important for me is that they are named by the CEO of the region, so more than the country, of the region, and they are accountable of the disability action plan that they put in place directly in the country. So we have I would say the corporate ambition, and then locally you have to adapt also the strategy, and thanks to this person, we are more country relevant, I would say, on disability. In terms of raising awareness and stereotype, I can give you an example of what we do. I think that the Person with Disability International Day is a good example to discuss on this subject. Obviously, it's not the only day where we need to speak on that, but it's a good occasion to speak everywhere at the same time on disability. You can go on the next slide, please. Yes, this is, because we are working on that on the department, I wanted to share with you what we have planned at corporate level, and then at country level, they can adapt and do more or whatever they want. We have decided to launch a photo contest. On the leitmotif for this year, it's I make a difference. I think that it's important that each people feel concerned by the subject, as a person, as a manager, as a team member. So the photo contest that we launched globally, so among the 200,000 people, it's very powerful because people within Accor Hotel, but I guess that it's the same in the other company. They like to share picture. They like to have an easy way to share a good moment within the team thanks to a picture. So it works well, and it also makes the opportunity to discuss on disability. We will create a best practice guide with concrete example, and we ask to the country to give us concrete example of what they do, and some testimonial of people who are disabled in the country. So this best practice guide will be also spread globally within Accor Hotel. And then we will do a series of short video, based on 5 scenarios that we thought that can be interesting for the people. The back pain, because in the hotel industry, the housekeeper suffer a lot from the back pain. So we want to be representative of the sector. So we will there's a scenario on that point. And also diabetes, deafness, blindness, and mental disability. So to make people aware of what it is behind a disability. You can go to the next slide. Yes, well, this is how we are running the video. This is how we drive the case of back pain within Accor Hotel. You can go to the next slide, please. Go to the next slide. Okay. I just wanted to show you the photo contest. We had already done that kind of event, action in the past year, and we really see that the people contribute with all the passion, and this is something that we would like to see the reality of the field. You can go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay. So this is more I present you what we plan at global level, but at corporate level. But a great initiative comes from the field, and it's difficult also to adapt. Well, it's difficult to spread, and we have discussed with Christine at lunchtime to do toolkits relevant always locally. So what is really what works well? It's when the country takes initiative based on what we give to them. So what works well is when the country make really their own tools. And for example, this is a tools which works very well in Brazil on disability and failure. And the tools has been more than 30% of the people within Brazil have been trained, have followed these e-learning training tools. Next slide. Another best practice from Australia, and I thought it was interesting. It's Mercure in Australia, who think that, okay, it's good for the people from the, let's work for the people within Accor, but it's also good, and we are proud to welcome people with disability. So let's partner with other specialists to adapt, to equip the room to welcome, to be disability, I will say, welcome for the customer. So this is some dedicated specific example that the Mercure in Australia has just done recently to discuss on that, but more than to discuss, to live disability in the hotel. That's all.
Good, Anne-Sophie. Thank you so much. After the company reviews, I think it's interesting to look at a foundation right now. Edurne, the floor is yours. And can you please have the slides from Edurne up as well?
Hi, good evening to everybody. It's a little bit of a challenge being here with 3 big companies as a foundation, but I think that I can explain to you a little bit about what we are doing in Spain, and we are starting to do in some other places, since the companies that are in Spain has their headquarters. Now they are starting to go globally, so in some way we are going with them. Next slide, please. As you can see there, we are the human resources consultants of ONSU Foundation, so our main job is to get people with disabilities into the labor market. And to do that, for sure, we need companies. And we need to speak your language too, which was one of the issues during the morning, and we are really, really aware of that. Because if we're not able to make human resources manager aware of the talent that people with disabilities have for their companies and be able to get into your procedure, your company's procurement, it's going to be impossible to get a real inclusion. As you can see there, it's our national network. We have a high number of big companies, but we also work a lot with small, medium enterprises, since it's important to work with both kind of companies in a different approach and in a tailored services. It's good to have so many companies because we get to work with companies from all kind of businesses, and we learn from each other. Next. But the point is, today we are speaking about stigma and we are speaking about stereotypes. I also agree that people with disabilities, because we have a disability, we are not a superwoman or a superman. I completely agree with that fact. I think that role models are really interesting to open certain doors or close certain crystal ceilings, but we are not superheroes at all. And if you just give that image, sometimes you want a company wants to enroll to hire the best superhero, and no, we are normal persons. But that's just one point, and as you consider, those are the unemployment rates of people with disabilities in Spain with each kind of disability. For sure, those who face the highest rates of unemployability are people with mental health issues, with mental disabilities, or intellectual disabilities. So I'm going to show you now a video. It's a really brief video of 1 minute. And I'm showing it to you because the person who speaks in the video is a person with a intellectual disability who speaks on a one-to-one basis to the companies, asking them to employ them. He also, as you will see at some point, he gives attention to the fact that in Spain, if a company enrolls or hires a person with disability, you get certain subsidies. But I think that the important fact of this video and why we are going to play it today is because he's a person with an intellectual disability who speaks peer-to-peer, who asks for a job that he's going to be able to do because he wants really to work every single day and to be a part of society. And after playing this video, during the next month, our job offers increased by almost 165%. People became aware that, and it went to the agenda another time. It also became aware that people with intellectual disability could develop really good job. And I'll play the video and we'll tell you one thing after the video.
Hola, mi nombre es Luis Castro Martín, tengo 85 años y estoy buscando trabajo, señor empresario, entre tú y yo. Sé que la responsabilidad social o hacer un mundo mejor son algunas de las razones por las que puedes contratarme. Pero en realidad tú y yo sabemos cuál es. La principal razón para darme un trabajo, por una subvención de 3.900 euros para hacerme un contrato y una deducción de 6.000 euros en el impuesto de sociedades y una modificación de 5.000 euros en la seguridad social. Estos son algunos de los motivos por los que nos contraten a las personas con discapacidad física y sensorial. Y no me importa que me contraten fuera. De verdad, yo quiero tener un trabajo. Y además, ¿sabes qué? Esta será mi oportunidad de demostrarte que voy a hacer un trabajo como cualquier persona, que voy a tener más ganas que nadie y que le voy a dar un aire nuevo a su empresa. Y efectivamente, sin más empresarios hacen lo que tú, entre todos, vamos a hacer un mundo. Muchísimas gracias.
So Luis Castro, he's an actor, but as you see, there's an email account at the end of the video. He got like 100 job offers after this video was downloaded. So the point is, I mean, in that moment, we just wanted to pay attention to the fact that people with intellectual disability can really work, and all kind of disabilities. But since there's a kind of disability with a higher stigma, we thought that that was a good idea to have him as the main actor of the video. So this is just a small example of what we try to do to deal with stereotypes and what we try to do to deal with stigma. As you see here in this slide, we are just speaking about what company needs. Company need talent, for sure. I mean, I think that nobody's going to tell me that you don't need talent. But when we're speaking about talent of people with disabilities, it's true that sometimes we get with certain barriers. In my everyday work is to go to global companies to meet with the human resources manager of the corporate, and he has to get all the programs down. I may imagine that you are getting used to that, to the subsidies, to the different business units. And sometimes we sit down at the table, and the first challenge that we have to face is that they don't know what is a disability. They just think that a disability is a wheelchair, and since I go in a wheelchair, it's really easy to think that all the disabled will go in a wheelchair, and it's not true. That's for sure. Or a blind person, we will always go for those who are completely blind, or you are completely deaf. There is no more disability. Disability is much more than that. So that's the first thing that we have to face. Like, show all the persons, or on the company people, that disability is much wider. And that's why probably there is always a person with disability who is able and capable of do every single job. It would match your company needs or not, because, I mean, every time that you do a selecting process, you interview lots of people, and some of that people doesn't work for their job. But not because they have a disability or because they are blind or because whatever, just because they don't fit. If there is one job, it's one person. But what we really aim is to have people with disabilities in every single selection process. That's what we want to do. And at the end, you'll get them hired for sure. And that's what we try first thing. Another problem that we have, we hired a person with disability 2 years ago and it didn't work. Oh yes, probably. It didn't work as it could have not worked in another situation. But that's the problem, that happens, that closes many opportunities for the future. That's what when we were speaking about the fact of hiring people with disabilities just because you have to do it or because that's not going to work. It's easy that you fail in that process and you won't create new opportunities for the future. And I'm saying that because a person with disability probably will do perfectly the job, and what our job is as a human resources consultancy is to make sure that the candidates that we send you are perfectly capable of doing the job, that their professional profile fits the job description and what the position needs, and soft skills and culture of the company. Because soft skills are really important, but they are not linked to disability, they are linked to everybody. And culture is also important. Because if the person doesn't fit in the culture of the company, we are going to have another problem too. So we take everything into account, and we send you people to your recruiting process. Why I'm saying that? Because that's another issue. Okay, how I'm going to handle the interview, or is he going to be able, or she going to be able to do that? That's our job. Not handling the interview, but we'll train people to be able to feel confidence with disability, because sometimes if you are not used to deal with disability, you feel a little bit afraid of asking certain questions, or is he going to be able to do that? Once I was at a job interview, and they asked me how I was going to get to my work every day, and I said, by car. I mean, I just need a parking spot. That's the whole main issue of this conversation. So that's what we train people just to get some stigma out of their head. Another thing, training. I think that we speak about training a lot. We train human resources managers. Those are really important. And we also encourage companies to begin the process also by the human resources department. Because if you are a human resources manager and you want people to hire people with disabilities in their teams, it's good that there is somebody with disability in the human resources team also. Like, you believe what you're saying. We train peers, colleagues, people in all the companies to feel more comfortable if they have a colleague with a disability, which is not such a big issue, but for some people it's a big issue to having a colleague with a disability. And we train like pretty much everything. I don't say we train. We speak with companies and we figure out which are the good things or what they need. And depending on what it's needed, that's what we do. So pretty much I think that those are some of the things that we do. We do much more things for sure. We also are really concerned right now about the career path, because we have realized that sometimes companies employ a person with disability, and just by the fact that you have a disability, it's assumed that you may not want to have a career path. That's an important issue too. People with disabilities want to have a career as anybody, and that's something that we have to consider. But I think that that's a good thing that we are speaking it about now, because it means that we already have people with disabilities at the company. So that's a good thing. And the other last thing that I wanted to say that I don't know why it just came out of my head, stereotypes at certain positions. That's the only last thing. Sometimes we have the idea that if you are blind, you may be really good at telemarketing, which, okay, you may be good or not, but maybe you don't like it, or maybe you're not better than the other person. I don't know why you have sometimes, or at least in our experience, there are certain companies that match a certain disability with a certain job. And just, if you tell them, no, this person can also work in this other place, they will just kind of mix ideas of what's going on. And it's like, no, I mean, it's a point of capabilities, not of disabilities. That's pretty much what I wanted to tell you.
Thank you for the overviews, and I saw a couple of people looking at, with the video, and we'll get to questions extremely soon, but I saw a couple of people looking like, is it available, and can we maybe use it? Well, I was personally also thinking about it, so maybe you come back to us afterwards saying like, is it publicly available, and can we use it? I really like it a lot. One question I want to ask before we really open up, and that's to the panel here about stigma and stereotypes. How do you know how far you are, how well you're doing as a company, or with the companies you are working with, for example, Iduna? How can you measure how well you're doing and where you want to be, and get a continuous improvement in that aspect? Because in a lot of cases, I guess, things are happening under the waterline and are not so visible, yeah, when it comes to stereotyping. So I'd like to hear some of your reactions on that. Maybe start with you, Yves.
Well, I would say in countries where we are legally allowed to do so, we measure our population of people with disabilities. In other words, how many people with disabilities we have within our organization, at which level of the organizations, whether we have managers with a disability or not. And so that indirectly shows how effective we are by dismantling different perceptions of or stereotypes of disability.
So it's looking at the end result, let's say with a better disability integration. If that's what you achieve, probably on the stereotyping and stigma, you're probably doing better too.
Absolutely.
Any more comments on this before we open up for further questions?
To be honest, it's very difficult to see how efficient is it all we do concerning stereotype, because well, in terms of KPI, yes, you're right. The number of people you have, it can be a KPI, but what we need to know, maybe it's the engagement of the people who are disabled within the company, or how they feel, if they really feel comfortable or not. And for the moment, we don't have.
I agree, it's quite difficult, and it's probably an indirect way of measuring. Last year here, on the 28th of October, someone in a video said you only improve on what you measure. There's a question about that, because as far as you're talking about soft skills and things related to diversity issues, maybe regarding stereotypes and the impact, the number of people among our workforce that have been trained or that have followed a session. But I mean, then how are they going to act or react in different type of situations? You're not there just to measure it. So I don't think there is a very evident way of answering this question, to be honest. Maybe someone wants to share something about that, but I mean...
I see the point, and I think that's also why I asked it. I think it's an extremely difficult point, yeah, because at the end it's part of measuring a cultural change of a company also in a way.
It's just like asking someone how deep is your love, referring to a song. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's very difficult.
Okay. Let's get to some questions. I saw one in the back there.
Yes, it's fascinating theme, and I'm a journalist, and media and disability is a kind of a new area, and we can do so much through media. And in the U.S., less than 1% people with disabilities represented in film, and 95% of these people are actors without disabilities. So we have to change this ableist culture. And ableism, if you don't know, is like racism and sexism. Is thinking that people with disabilities are less than people without disabilities. I agree totally with you. No superheroes, just normal people, employees, consumers, suppliers, and we need this neutral image of people with disabilities everywhere in advertisement, and your companies can do that even in your internal communication, flyers of your own employees with disabilities. They have to be included everywhere. They have to be represented because society is not used to being near them. So they think it's awkward to be near people with disabilities. So we're starting this network, and we plan to, include more people with disabilities and promote their rights through media. Thank you.
Maybe I'm thinking about a survey that we did in our brick and mortars regarding the impact of all the initiatives. What we noticed is that when integrating someone with disability in a team in one of our store, the collective performance of the team in the brick and mortar is increasing. And why? Because having someone being different, that's what I would use, gets the other members of the team being more caring about each other and about this person. And they consider that this person, even if it's not a superhero, might have more difficulties in a way in its everyday life. They care much about it, and we noticed that absenteeism decreased in those teams. So in a way, integrating different people within the workforce in a way leads to more efficient production. Might be a way to give a measure.
Regarding what you said, Christine, we made a study with Repsol. They are not here, but we work really, really a lot with them. About that, about what the climate that was in the workforce due to the inclusion of people with disabilities. And they have a really strategic program that's called Capacidades Diferentes. And the people, their workers, the thing that we're more proud about of the whole company was this program, Capacidades Diferentes. And probably yes, because you're not a superhero. But when you go to work every single day, and you have a life that's a little bit different, and you have to face certain things that other people don't, you feel more confident and a little bit more like, I don't know, not being the whole day saying how bad is something. So it's true. And we've done some studies with other companies, not in such a big way, but it's think that it's repeatable.
I would like to add something to your remark regarding the difference between the US or North America. I would say the Anglo-Saxon world, including the UK, versus Europe in general. The main difference, in my view, is that the sense of empowerment, the sense of responsibility of people with disabilities being the actor of their own life is different in the US or in North America or in the UK versus in Europe. In Europe, I can say that because I'm European, people acquiring a disability tend to expect everything from the others. From the NGOs to help us getting a job, from the education, helping us getting the appropriate education level we need, from the businesses to provide us with jobs, from public authorities to provide us with some sort of a safety net. And so what do? We are the actor of our own life. And so we also have a certain level of responsibility in our life. And this is something maybe that is more visible in this side of the pond.
I'm just looking at time right now, and I should have negotiated some more time maybe with Stefan. I think I'm going to do that next time. But I think now let's stick to the 1 hour. So I think everybody here is also going to be available in the break. So I hope if you have questions, please go to the panelists in the break and ask them. One final question. I give you the honor, please.
I hope it's a good question then. Well, thank you very much for sharing such insightful information about the stereotype. And this is representing the employers or business views towards the stereotype. From a person's or candidate with disability views, they look at these companies. First, I need to hide my disability. I don't need to disclose it, because if I disclose my disability, it will decrease the chances of being employed by one of these respected and giant companies. Second, if I got a chance to be employed in these prestigious organization, my likelihood to hold a paraprofessional or a lower job is great. So I will never be holding a decision-making job. My question is very simple. What is your stereotype towards such stereotype? Thank you.
Who wants to take on this philosophical question? Yeah, but if I look at it from my side, I certainly think there are situations like this. But at the end, we need to get rid of stereotypes from both sides. Also, stereotyping situations as you've been describing right now. Yeah? So we don't want to have stereotypes on either side, obviously. Yeah? So.
Mark, maybe can I add that I'm not sure we can ever get rid of stereotypes. The only thing we can do is getting conscious of them, and being conscious of when they activate themselves, either during evaluation or recruitment process, for example. And sometimes the best way to avoid having biases in decision-making because of stereotypes is being too in front of the candidate, for example, or the person that you are talking with, because this way you can have another perspective or another point of view. I mean, it might be quite simple in a way, but I believe that we will never get rid of it.
Thanks for that perspective, Christine. What I will do now is close the session, and let's have all the questions that you still have to the panelists in the break. But before closing it down, let me ask one question, and I'm going to challenge everybody here in the panel to answer this with 1 or 2 sentences. What the biggest priority for you next year is going to be on the disability inclusion agenda? Not sure if there's any volunteers who want to start, but just keep it short and crisp. What your biggest priority for next year is going to be?
I can start, and I'm going to be very crisp. Keep repeating the same message again and again and again. Look at the person and not the disability. Stop talking about disabled people. Talk about people living with a disability. That's a difference.
That was crisp and clear. Thank you, Yves.
Concerning diversity and person with disability, it's inclusive. So respect the person and give the same opportunity to the same person, regardless of the diversity.
Thanks.
From Orange perspective, I would say that is having more and more countries willing to be involved in our International Day for Disabled Persons in December, and having dedicated actions on that, being able to have it spread all around the countries where we are.
Thanks, Christine. Edona?
just, I'll finish with what you just said. That's another part of their activity, is to make people with disability aware that they are able to work, that they have to learn how to work, they have to get trained, but there is a spot for everybody. That's another part of our activity. But since today we were speaking about companies, I haven't spoken at all about what we do with people with disabilities, to make them aware that they have to empower themselves to seek for a job.
Okay, thank you for these perspectives. I would like to close it, and I want to say a big thank you to the panelists.
Okay, we have now our last coffee break. As you know, coffee breaks and mingling is one of the key elements of any of these meetings. Thanks to Mark, you only have now 15 minutes for a coffee, so blame it on him, but I think it was worthwhile to lose those minutes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We will be starting quite soon. With a smile. Sorry? We'll be starting quite soon now. Okay. Please, everybody, get ready. For the last session, I know it's been a long day, but it was worth waiting till now. So you will see we have a rich panel. My name is Bruce Roach. I'm currently the vice chair of this network, and I'm working for the ADECO group. The difficult task of moderating a session on cooperation is that we will have to be imaginative enough together to set bridges. You will see you have different situations that will be explained with different types of collaboration, and we have to prolong the reflection on where it gets us. Disability inclusion is a journey, so I propose we have a close round of the actors that will be speaking this afternoon. We have Suzanne Brière from Cornell University. We have Alessandra Furtado from Leonard Cheshire Disability. We have Susan Scott Parker from Business Disability International, Mathilde Tabary, whom you already know from Carrefour, and we have Murteza Khan from Aga Khan. You're here? Plus Hervé Bernard, who's not on the program, but he's there, from Handicap International. I've been equipped with this hammer, and a role that has been assigned to me is to give a hammer knock every 10 minutes a speaker does. So don't worry, it will happen sometimes, or not, but don't be surprised. So to get started, I think we will start with Suzanne on the collaboration between private sector and universities. Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Precise minutes with you, and I will go as quickly as I can through the slides that I have. I was asked, I think probably to do this because I'm at a university. I think it's appropriate. I am not going to focus on my own university. If you have any interest about what we're specifically doing at Cornell, I would be happy to discuss that with you, but that is not where I'm going to focus. I'm going to talk more broadly about what I see happening in the US, what companies are telling us, what I'm observing about what seems to be more interesting and I hope powerful practices that are being done that are helping us to make a better match between the talent that is out there, who are young people with disabilities, and the jobs that are waiting for them. So next slide. In the 9 minutes that I have with you, I'm going to go over these points very quickly, and the slides, I believe, will be available. So if any of these are things you want to take away, I think we will be able to give them to you. First, I want to talk a little bit about why this is so poignant. People have alluded to it. I have brought in statistics of why we're so concerned about this in the United States. What employers are telling us, what we're observing that they're doing. I am in an Employment and Disability Institute, and we conduct research at Cornell University on a whole host of things about job matching for people with disabilities and employer practices, which is why we are intimately involved in this. The value of internships, I'm going to focus a bit on them and how best to structure them, what we know to seem to be best practices there, and leave you with some resources, both U.S. associations that are in this space doing particularly things focused on disability and getting people into the world of work with appropriate training, and other related resources and references from all of where I've taken this information from. So starting with, the next slide please, education and outcomes disparities for youth with disabilities, which I'm sad to have to report on, but this is our situation in the US. Next slide. Educational attainment, as you can see here, the tower in this figure on the left is our young people with no disabilities, and the ones on the right are people with disability. And as you can see, there are far more individuals who are young people with disabilities who are only getting high school or less than high school education, almost 60% compared to their non-disabled peers, where it's less than 40%. And again, only 10 to 15% having bachelor's degrees compared to almost 40%, 35 or so percent of young people without disability. So we have lots of work to do. I think it doesn't really depend on disability. I think it depends on opportunities that we are affording people. So that's our sad story there. This plays out in terms of course, people being able to get employment. And part of that is getting employment experience, which employers tell us and young people tell us. This shows that young people in the 16 to 20-year-old range, a few of them are employed only, obviously across all these categories, except school only. People with disabilities are not faring as well in terms of getting employment. So school only, employment only, more people without disabilities. School only, a few more, but not by many points. Young people with disabilities employed and in school, more opportunities, almost twice as many for young people without disabilities. And not employed or in school, more young people with disabilities. And then this is how it plays out as they get older. 3/4 of our young people without disabilities are getting jobs in this 21 to 30-year-old range, compared to only about 40% of young people without disabilities. So that's why we think these are poignant issues to address. So this is what employers tell us. When we survey employers, they tell us that they cite lack of qualified applicants as a barrier to hiring people with disabilities. Employers cite lack of not only the training, but also skill and experience. They said that our young people don't have all these requisite needs. But also young people with disabilities most commonly cite that they don't have enough appropriate education and training, and that employers are assuming that they can't do the job as a barrier in the job search. So we know that part of it is there is disparity in preparation, both in terms of training and opportunity for experience, but it is also, we believe, the perceptions of applicants and recruiters and hiring managers. So there's bias also operating there as well. We have both that we need to deal with. Some successful employer initiatives. One is summer residential internships. Thank you for keeping up with me. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it seems having 6 to 8 weeks in the summer, many more employers are doing this in the United States because it's lower cost, it's lower investment in terms of supervision, and the students can get out of school to do this. So there are many internship opportunities being created by companies, by federal agencies, and by NGOs to give people an opportunity to acquire experience. Outreach to student offices, disability offices, is a preferred approach, because what we're finding is recruitment offices in colleges the placement offices don't necessarily know where to go to find the students with disabilities. Sometimes because the offices, most of the time, are very different, and the other is that students perhaps also may not have disclosed. So going to both offices when you're recruiting to your preferred organization, educational organization, is the way to go. Some companies have told us that they affirmatively recruit. If they're hiring minorities, they go to minority-focused higher educational institutions, and they do it in both ways. They will actually go to the campuses and do 2-day intensives about who they are and why they want to affirmatively recruit, or they'll bring representatives from colleges that are more likely to have minorities, including people with disabilities, to their campus and talk about who they are and why diversity and inclusion and why hiring people of difference is really important to them. And that seems to heighten the likelihood that they will make a good match over time. They've also talked to us about the importance, and we observe that if you send a naive recruiter in that situation, they will do far less than if you send someone who has been tasked and trained to interview effectively with people with disabilities or other people of difference. So sending your more seasoned champions, who are your D&I people who really understand why this is a strategic imperative, into the colleges is really important. We like to promote internships, and we do that because we have found that the likelihood of making a successful match of a candidate with a disability is 6 times higher if you've had an internship program in your organization over the last year. It enhances the likelihood of hiring, it builds job seeker skills, it's a win-win, and demonstrates those skills to employers, so it's a lower risk, lower threat. Supervisors get acculturated to what it means to supervise a person with a disability with very low risk on their side. And it provides that young person with a disability valuable training and support, and they can add to their credentials so they have higher credibility if there isn't a match there and they go out on the market, which they may well. We also have found, the research shows that school-to-work programs increase the likelihood of later adult employment. When we've looked across 60 school programs and watched what they do, when they make those kinds of real-world training opportunities available to high schoolers, there's a much higher likelihood they will get jobs later because they understand what the world of work is all about. Here are some features of internship programs. We see that larger organizations are much more likely to do it, 22% compared to smaller organizations. They perhaps out of practice or resources available. Common elements are a specific project to attach the intern to, so that they have a sense of completion and it's useful. Support personnel within the organization, a defined location for the intern to work, so they really have a home. And some companies are piloting programs around specific disabilities. It was referenced here. Autism is one, certainly, that we see in tech companies increasingly. Others are more generic. Key practices: an orientation to get the managers, mentors, and interns on the same page, an official intern handbook, so to set clear expectations in a welcoming way, dedicated managers, strong connections with upstream candidate sources, so get your candidates from the right places that you really will hire from. At panel discussions between interns and recent hires to showcase the company and answer their questions. Surveys at the middle and the end of the program so that you get feedback and understand how to improve. There's not a lot of information about prevalence, implementation, and measurement of these elements, but this is anecdotal information that these are the best ways to go. And there's not much known about disability-specific practices right now, so I'm telling you what makes internships in general work better. There is a real need for disability-specific internships, and within those, we know from employers telling us that.
First one.
Okay. Do I get a second one? Is that a warning? The next one comes closer. Okay, so. Stronger, more systematic planning needed for supports and accommodations. So when interns are there, they need an infrastructure that's going to support them. And directors of internship programs need information on their obligations around accessible services. Interns come to campus and they can't get into buildings because the pre-work hasn't been done, or they don't have accessible residential facilities nearby. So all of these kinds of considerations are really important for the interns, and it also builds culture awareness within the organization. And our Department of Labor does have a guide online to these kinds of considerations. I won't go through these, but these are similar kinds of considerations or challenges about building the infrastructure. In the interest of time, I will leave those for you and tell you that there are many related associations. Here are 5, and on the next slide, Association on Higher Education and Disability, the National Service Inclusion Project, Career Opportunities for Students with Disabilities, something called Lyme Connect. Many of these train students, they train universities, or they build matching between young people with disabilities who are career ready and employers who post their jobs. American Association for the Advancement of Science Entry supports internships in the STEM career area to build science, technology, engineering, and math capacity in young people with disabilities and get them to the world of work. Here are the links to those, and here, if you're interested in any of the research behind what I've shared with you, is related references that you are welcome to. May within time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Suzanne. Now I will turn to Alessandra, who's just right next to me. And Alessandra, you will tell us a little bit about your organization and specific cooperations.
Yes, and no pressure with the time since you're so close to me, so I'll just get it in ahead. So if we could have my first slide, please. So I'm going to present an example of a partnership that we've had with Accenture, and then towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to invite Cecile to give the Accenture point of view from the partnership that Leicestershire Disability and Accenture have had for the past almost 9 years now. So go into the next slide, please. So just give you a brief view of what the partnership how the partnership has evolved and how it was constructed. So we started in 2009 with a small pilot across 4 countries in South Asia, and the idea was just to build and test a model of how we could, within this model of partnering between a nonprofit and a for-profit, skill, train, and then place people into jobs and or kickstart their careers or their businesses within self-employment. That was implemented in 2 years, and the targets were around training and skilling about 750 people and getting at least 600 of those into some sort of employment. The pilot was quite successful. We then moved into a scaling phase, which was then implemented in the following 3 years in 5 countries, but in many more locations within those countries. And then the numbers really have grown from the 700 to a target of about 8,000 people being trained, and 7,000 of those going into formal employment or waged or self-employment. And then now we are at the 3rd phase of our current partnership, and we're working in 6 countries. So we're replicating the model that has been successfully implemented in South Asia and East Asia into South Africa. So complete change of context to see how that would work. And again, the numbers have grown. But I think that what is quite interesting about the current phase is that we're focusing a whole lot more on innovation and how we can bring the digital transformation via virtual livelihood centers, which are at the core of the model, and how we reach out to persons with disabilities within their communities, but also then how we link them with businesses and employers who are interested in employing them. So we could go to the next slide, please. So the partnership model, and I think this is probably the key bit that I want to talk to you about. I think that the reason why we feel that our partnership with Accenture has been so successful and so valuable is that it all starts with the values. We do share the same values of inclusion, of diversity, but I think to me the 2 key ones are excellence and innovation. We are constantly challenging each other. So Leicestershire sometimes can be a pain in the neck with Accenture, and like challenging them and say, okay, this is great, what are you doing internally, what are your practices, not just at global level, but we do connect very well at country level. So in every one of the countries where we operate, we do have a key point of contact with an Accenture person who is then responsible for helping us manage the project, and I'll get into the governance in a little bit. And likewise, the other way around, Accenture is constantly challenging us as well as how can you innovate, how can you do this better? And I think that has those shared values, put us in a very strong position. The next bit would be the expertise. Thank you. And I think that what we've discovered is that by having very different backgrounds, but a very specific set of expertise, we actually complement each other very well. So LCD focuses, we're a pan-disability organization working in the UK, but also internationally across Africa and Asia. And our expertise is the reach that we have to local communities and access to individuals with disabilities, whereas the expertise that Accenture brings is that process orientation and innovation, a strong M&E background, so they have really shaped the way that we do M&E within the program and how we learn and how we innovate, not just within the program, but then how we have learned from that experience with Accenture and how we're implementing that across all of the other activities that we do. So we feel that has given us, and then I'll ask Cecile to kind of share how she feels that we have contributed to Accenture, but we feel that they have given us a whole lot more than just this program. The third aspect of it is having clear roles and, and everybody feeling comfortable within their roles. So we're the direct implementer and a technical lead when it comes to disability and what the needs of persons with disabilities are as an organization that represents and supports persons with disabilities. Whereas Accenture brings their knowledge, well, on top of obviously their financial resources involved, but they do bring that technology, M&E solutions, but also the knowledge of what businesses are interested in and the connection with other business, clients and supply chains that they work with at country level. So it's a whole lot easier for us to, as we're together designing and implementing these projects on the ground, for us to understand, we, from an NGO point of view, sometimes we make assumptions of what business want, and we make assumptions of what the business language is and how we should address that. It's a whole lot easier because actually we can just pick up the phone in India or in Philippines or in South Africa and talk to someone in Accenture and say, this is what we have in mind. What do you think? And sometimes the answer is going to be very straightforward, and sometimes they're going to say, well, I'm not quite sure, let me talk to other businesses. And that cycle and that flow of information makes the program a whole lot more robust. The last point, I think it's around governance, and I think another area that has worked really well in this partnership is the shared oversight in country, as I said. So when we started in that pilot, it was very much a global level, and the shared oversight was happening at global level. As the partnership has evolved throughout the years, what we see is that transition. There is still that connection at global level, so we still sit in networks together. We do have advocacy pieces, or we try to influence other business or even governments, and we use the examples of the way that we operate together to influence others at a global level. But where everything actually works is at country level. So it gets boiled to that strong sense of shared governance at country level, where the Accenture team and Lenny Cheshire teams are working together almost on a daily basis, checking in, and supporting each other. Yeah, and I did talk about the program design and implementation. So that's the other thing. It's not just about the monitoring of the implementation. So I think that the partnership is different in the sense that it's not a donor-recipient relationship, even though there are financial resources involved, but it's much more truly a partnership where we're both trying to implement something together, even though we are the direct implementers, but we're always seeking the guidance of Accenture, and they're always coming back to us as well, seeking guidance on internal issues that they may have, or internal situations, or situations that they may have come across in some of the different countries where we operate. So if we could move to the next slide, please. I just wanted to give you a few examples of the added value that we felt that this partnership has brought to both sides, and I hope here I'm speaking for both of us, and then Cecile, please correct me if you feel that I'm out of place. But I think that one of the perhaps, and this is not necessarily an added value in itself, but it's more of a cause, is that the partnership goes beyond being time-bound. It's not just about the specific phase and the grants that are attached to each of these phases, but it's that continuity and the evolution and the commitment from both parties that we will hope have this partnership for the long term. It goes beyond the discrete intervention, as you would normally have within development projects. I think that's been quite positive. I think another added value is that by working together, we combine their strengths and we act as a link and representative within our respective constituencies. So having Lena Cheshire gives Accenture, when speaking to persons with disability, a bit more legitimacy. The same happens to us when we go and speak to businesses, because the moment that I say, well, we do work with Accenture, then people are more willing to listen to what we have to say, and the same, the reverse is true as well. I think in terms of improving local ownership, sustainability, and reach, as well as the mutual exchange of resources and expertise, so we do get lots of employees from Accenture to come and volunteer, so they have that first hand experience of what it is to recruit, to train, to work side by side with persons with disabilities. And I think that then that brings a lot of, what the previous panel was talking about around stigma and stereotypes. It helps you break those firsthand, because they do have access to people while they're still being trained, and then they help us in coaching people and working on soft skills, and sometimes even some of the more hard skills as well. I did talk a lot about innovation, and one of the things that we feel very proud about this partnership is that by working with Accenture, being constantly challenged by them, and how do you make this better? How do you make this more inclusive? How do you make this more cost efficient? How do you make it more innovative at the end of the day? We have been able to leverage more work, and we've been able to reach out to far more people across many more countries where we don't work with Accenture. Okay, thank you. And finally, I think there are lots of joint efforts on awareness raising, again, within the different constituencies in the different places where we work, and with the private sector, but as well as with state actors. So we do work alongside governments as well, and Accenture does help us with that. So, sorry, would you like to say something? I kind of ate up all the time. I apologize.
Tell me. I can talk for 2 minutes? Yeah?
You want to? Please.
Absolutely.
From here.
No, absolutely from here, yeah. Just, I'm not going to challenge you today. Don't worry, at least. I don't have time, so that's the reality. Just maybe 3 ideas, you covered it all. So it's really the partnership with, I would say, a big P, so the real partnership into action more than words that we illustrated today. One thing that we really valued in the partnership was the fact that you are locally present. So it's real, it's not about talking, it's not about a project globally with no people benefiting from it. And so it's happening where we have people who are interested to be engaged and to be touched by the relationship they have with the person with disabilities that they would not be able to do in their standard work. So for us, it's a way to really engage everyone who wants to contribute to society locally. So that's a big advantage we have seen with this initiative. The second one is the recruitment, because again, we have discussed about CSR in the morning. We don't do that only because we want to be nice, okay, even though obviously everyone wants to be nice, but because we really want to hire talents. And for us, that's one way to really be aligned with where expanding our pools of talents. And thanks to organizations like that, we could do it. We have been able to recruit around 40 people, I guess, in Philippines and India, thanks to the program. So that could sound small, but still that gives us some tools, also some understanding about how it works. And we have been able to onboard persons with disabilities at Accenture. And the last one would tie to what I have shared this morning, the digital skilling, having this into action, having this partnership to really see what it means to create the onboarding of people who would be far from the work is really key. So it's the innovation into action that we have been able to do with you. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Cécile, for the complementary information. Thank you, Alessandra. And now we will discover Susan Scott-Parker's from Business Disability International examples of cooperation and partnerships. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Of course, it was I who suggested a little tap would tell us when we got to the 10 minutes. I hadn't expected an entire hammer. I've got two areas to explore. One is how business benefits from learning directly from people with disabilities. The other is how business can actually promote learning directly from NGOs and how NGOs can learn directly from business in a way which makes it easier for us to get where we want to go. Very quickly on BDI, we were set up by a small group of companies. We're in startup. Our job is actually perhaps summarized by saying, what do national leaders need from HQ if they're going to move into best practice consistently in terms of how they treat and value their customers, their people, and their potential colleagues everywhere in which they do business. And so we're driven by the quality of the customer experience, the productivity gains that you get, because of course what we focus on too often, I think, is recruitment, when actually any large corporation will have a minimum of 10-12% of their workforce will have a disability and would be more productive if the company had the disability expertise it required to make it easier for them to do their jobs. And so coming back to the question is, what does headquarters need to do? What process does it control? What messages does it convey? And how does it build the capacity of the entire business? Because this requires facilities to be on board, procurement not to use suppliers that get in the way when you're trying to make adjustments for applicants, employees, and colleagues. It requires communications in a different way. It requires your customer presence to be experienced in a different way. So it goes right across the business. But one common ground, of course, is that none of your colleagues in those functions will know exactly what to do unless they're talking to people with disabilities directly to find out what it's like when they try to buy your stuff, get through your website, when you put your hand up in the business and say, these lights give me migraines, what actually happens for those individuals and the journeys they're taking. And then to say, and which of those obstacles in those journeys is actually in the control of global, of head office. So what does global need to actually require in terms of what needs to change? What must they encourage or facilitate in order to get to the best practice that we called disability confidence some time ago? We're launching 2 task forces. We're saying to procurement, how do you talk to disabled people as users of the suppliers that you're bringing in to get a feeling for whether or not they know how to remove obstacles for your people, your customers, and a global property and facilities task force. But what we know above all is that the only way, building on the themes of the day, the only way to challenge stereotypes is bringing people together. Eve saying in the room, if we possibly can. The only way to understand what's really going on in your business and with your customers is to ask people with disabilities the practical questions. And so what we've just launched, I think this is when, I think I have 3 slides. I never know what I'm going to say, so slides don't work for me. Aha, I do have a slide. We've just launched this. To my intense irritation, an incompetent courier has meant you didn't get copies today. But this is the first guide for global business on the practicalities of how you help your leaders, how you help your facilities people, your technology people, your procurement guys, your HR people, to learn directly from disabled people with detailed case studies from Barclays, GSK, and Infosys in terms of some of the things they've done which have worked and how they made it happen. We're talking about everything from disabled employee networks, which must be the way of the future, to mystery shopping, using disabled customers as mystery shoppers. I'm very keen on asking disabled graduates to mystery shop your processes in terms of partnership with universities. So you get direct feedback on what it's like to try to apply online only to discover that you can't, which is something we haven't talked enough about today, I fear. That we've got examples of listening groups when chief executives invite anyone with an interest in our performance on disability to come over for a coffee for an hour, and does that a couple of times a year minimum, and then is seen to actually act on what they hear. So our technology task force set up by the UK Business Disability Forum came about because the chief executive of Barclays, every time he asked his people what was going on, they said technology, technology, technology is getting in the way. We've got guidance on how you use focus groups, or how when you're monitoring your employee satisfaction, employee engagement scores, what kind of questions you can ask, which pull out the extent to which your disabled colleagues are more or less engaged. Are they experiencing more discrimination when they go for promotion than others? I think you'll find that they often are in many companies. And so what I'm urging you to do is to download it, since you can't take it home and read it on the plane. Did I convey my irritation? I think we've got a downloadable something or other slide there where you can take the details. It's on our website. But what I really want you to do, of course, is to send it to every business leader responsible for property. How do you know the building's working if you haven't actually had people with a range of disabilities walk that building with you, roll that building with you, and give you the feedback on what it's like to try that heavy door? You say it's health and safety. I say it's just a heavy door and you can fix it. So send it out to your leads on all these functions and say, we need a systematic approach to talking to our customers and our people, because we benefit directly. It saves us money, time, mistakes, retrofitting, all of that. Then very quickly, because I'm sure there's a gavel somewhere about to come down, on the learning directly from the NGO Disabled People's Organization environment, we find that a structured approach here is again very helpful. If the companies say, if these NGOs do not give us suitable candidates, don't seem to understand our reality, well, don't walk away from that, invite them in. Say that we will use agencies that help disabled people into jobs if they come into the business and spend 3 days with us learning how we do things. This, of course, is at national level, but this is because head office has said talking to folk at local level and forging these collaborations is just sensible. You invite them in for 3 days to understand the business and get a sense for what you're looking for. You help them to understand the skills you require so they can pre-screen properly, so they don't send you unsuitable candidates. If they send you unsuitable candidates, well, maybe you stop using them. Maybe the word gets out that you have high expectations of these suppliers. You ask them to be there to answer the phone if your manager has a problem, not the day before the job start, but for the next 12 months, so that you're minimizing the risk the managers associated in their own minds with this. And that in exchange, the companies give you advance notice as NGOs. We've got these vacancies coming up in the next 18 months. These are the skills we're going to be looking for. And if you've got people who aren't quite ready, maybe we can help them to get ready in terms of customized training and targeted training and so on. But the point is that you enter into a service level agreement with these service providers, not informal. You've got a level agreement that says for the next 12 months, this is how we're going to work together so that you understand us better, because making it easier for my managers to say, yes, I will hire that person, makes it easier for the disabled job seeker. Focusing on making it easier for the employer to say yes, while the employers are focused on improving their disability-related performance so they don't make assumptions about what people can do on the basis of a label. These service level agreements, I think, could be a breakthrough in this because it requires both parties to behave differently. As I look at country after country, the agencies in the middle that help disabled people into work continue to do the same things in the same way and then complain that the companies aren't getting their act together. Both groups have to change the way they operate, and structuring it on the basis of talking to people with disabilities so that you understand what their journeys into work and when they want to keep their jobs are really all about is the essence of it. How'd I do? And is that the link for the download? Is that the one? Okay, thank you. And it's free, so you have no excuse not to send it to everybody. And please tell us what you think about it.
Thank you, Susan, for the valuable material that you offer to share. And you spare us one knock.
You mean I had time to go?
Well, if you want, you have another 2 minutes, yeah. But maybe reactions with the questions and answers later. Mathilde, now I turn to you. Besides your responsibilities within the network, you work at Carrefour, and you're in charge of social development and diversity, and you have some examples to share with us.
Thank you both. What I will present is about our supermarket branch in France, which is just some elements of context. It employs 30,000 people at the moment in France. And Carrefour worldwide is 380,000 people in 10 countries. Just to, can you have this slide? More. Yeah, it's okay. So in 2005, a first agreement with social partners was signed in the supermarkets branch towards employment for people with disabilities. In our hypermarket branch, which is 70,000 people approximately in France, a first agreement was already signed in 1999, and it's some kind of an example for the other branches in France and in the other countries also. Following this this agreement, we supermarkets have now 6.3% of disabled people among their workforce, which is quite good in the sense that it is beyond the French legislation, but it is not. Having said that, it is not a final, anyway, a final objective, of course, and we need to go further to still work on recruitment and integration, on keeping disabled people in work, and also on promotion of disabled people. We will be very happy one day to say, we would be very proud one day to say that we have one disabled person as the store director, for example, which is not the case now. So this is one issue on which we are working on more and more, and also keeping disabled people in work, so that they can continue, they can grow on, and they can progress within the company. What I want to say about this, that keeping disabled workers in work, this is approximately 200 employees in supermarkets which are kept in employment every year, and this is all about inclusiveness, actually, because it provides, what we want is to provide our employees with confidence, to let them know that they are supported, that they can, if they happen to be disabled one day in their professional life, they won't lose their job. They can be different because of this disability and continue that job and be accepted. This is all about the issue and the spirit on the messages that you want to provide. So we can go on for the next slide. No, please go. The goals of can go, please. Yes, the goals of keeping disabled employees in work is keeping every worker with health issues in the workforce in their original position. This is our objective, and the objective which is written in this agreement I've just mentioned. So keeping disabled, this is the next slide, keeping disabled employees in the workforce, what does it mean? It means financial means. There's a budget which is dedicated to keeping disabled workers in the workforce. These are committed actors with a project, a national project pilot in the company, and regional disability project leaders. Also the store managers have to be committed, of course, and we also have people in the stores who are specifically dedicated to disability, and who help employees at the very local level. And next, all this can be done with the support of technical teams in our company, and in the branch and at group level, providing material solutions, and also with the help of occupational physicians, ergonomists, and consultants. When we speak about, then it is the next slide, about partner. Technical, yes, to find, it means finding technical solutions regarding equipment, for example, change of seats, for example, getting new handling machines, finding solutions regarding work environment for transport or social premises, some aid to directly to the person to have better hearing or improve the vision. It can also be organizational solutions concerning the work environment, work organization, with, for example, division of tasks within teams, changing position, additional training, or also scheduling solutions for example, to adapt the number of hours per week or per time period according to the needs of the person. So, final or temporary solutions which are developed gradually, or a combination of those, and the idea is enabling the person to keep his or her job. So, regarding partnerships, I wanted to say this is all this can be done with only with in partnership with internal partners and external partners. Internal partners, as I said, with the concept department, with the technical department, with also the occupational health department, and external experts, ergonomists, occupational physicians, which will help us to identify the adaptation we have to make. Manager, Health and Safety Committee, Mission Handicap, the source contact and the regional disability project leader. Everybody has to be on board and consulted. So, as just some examples. Okay, we can go the next slide. So you have here some examples, concrete examples of adaptations which can have been made. For example, a person has been helped at several times. She has changed departments. Her workstation and cloakroom have been reorganized. Her electric wheelchair has been also co-financed and installed and implemented. You have also on the right somebody for whom he has a new tool to slice cheese loaves. He also has been provided with a platform making it easier for her to have access to all the cheese. The cashier in the bottom has been providing with sitting accommodation, which can be we have other quite a lot of people benefit from this kind of seats. And it can also be the last slide show other pictures with a footrest, rotating plate, knee pads. You have cash register screens, adjustable desk, electric forklift. Well, so different tools which can help the persons and help them remaining in their job in the company. That's it.
Thank you, Mathilde. I didn't have to use that, so you may hear it again, but it shows us how many actors are concerned with in terms of cooperation to help someone get their job retained. It's really important. Now I turn to Murtaza Khan, who's at the other end of the table, who will give us some insights on how to help supply and demand join.
Sure. Could I just see my slides, please? Perfect. So I would like to talk to you today about the Bangladesh Business and Disability Network, which is a new initiative in Bangladesh that's looking to balance the equation between the demand and supply side of disability inclusion. Next. So quick overview, I'll give you a bit of the Bangladesh context to place the information, followed by 2 examples of the kind of initiatives that are happening on both through collaborations of demand and supply side, followed by what the network is hoping to do by bringing these things together on a larger stage. Next. So Bangladesh has a population of 160 million people, and it's approximated that at least 16 million people with disabilities live there. Our GDP is about 195 billion, and we're growing at a rate of about 6.6%, which is amongst the top 5 globally. Just to give you an idea of how quickly our infrastructure needs are growing, along with the need for an increased and much more skilled labor force. And we hope that the requisite amount of people with disabilities will be represented in that labor force as we move forward. And as you would expect in a developing country, we face a lot of soft barriers and hard barriers for people with disabilities, including negative societal attitudes on the soft barrier side, as well as infrastructure limitations from an accessibility perspective. Next. But that being said, there are still organizations who are working to make a difference. I would like to give you an example of a factory called Interfab, which manufactures woven apparels for brands such as Hugo Boss, Calvin Klein, and Tommy Hilfiger, to give you an idea of how linked they are to the global supply chain. And in this program, they partnered up on the supply side with the Government Training Institute, with CRP, which is a disability NGO, as well as technical assistance from the ILO. And the overall objective was to design a program that is sort of driven by the skills requirement from industry, so from the manufacturing facility of Interfab and other similar garments manufacturers, while the supply side of the equation to ensure that the training was deployed in a responsible and proper way, they had representation from the government and the NGO side as well. Next, please. Quickly, how the program was carried out. 4 months of off-site training to start things off, and this was deployed at the government institutes as well as the disability NGO CRP, followed by 8 months on-the-job training at the Interfab factory. And this led to the creation of a competency skills logbook, which the ILO really assisted with through their technical support. And this was essentially a portfolio to show what are the skills that the trainees have been able to attain through this program. And it also served as a way to showcase their newly acquired skills in case they went to a different manufacturer and not just with Interfab. And there was also an assessment done by the Bangladesh Technical Education Board, and this eventually led to a certification which could be used industry-wide. Next, I would like to tell you a bit about my own company's initiative. We're a Bangladesh-based company that was founded in 1945, and we have multiple joint ventures with foreign multinationals in telecommunications, textiles. Myself, I'm involved with water purification as well. And we also have our social responsibility side that looks at health and education, broadly speaking. And it was a few years ago at actually an ILO workshop that we first learned really about the importance of having a more disability-inclusive workforce. And that inspired us to look into this issue a little more deeply because it was new to us. And we thought, why not try to partner with someone who's already worked in the field and has the experience, which is when we approached CRP, the Center for the Rehabilitation of the Paralyzed. And they've been working in Bangladesh since the 1970s. And we also became one of the first organizations from Bangladesh to join the Global Business and Disability Network. Next. So through our partnership with CRP, we set up this center in Chittagong, which is the second large city in Bangladesh, where the land and the infrastructure was provided by AK Khan, whereas the services are managed and provided by CRP. Next. Physiotherapy. Next. Occupational therapy. Next. Speech and language therapy. Next. A prosthetics and orthotics workshop from the Red Cross that was generously provided. Next. We have young Muhammad Topu here, who was born with a deformed leg, as you can see, but thanks to the ICRC's generous donation, he's able to be mobile and hopefully participate more in society. Next. And we have a vocational training and job placement facility where people are getting training in computer operations, electronics repair work, as well as sewing machine operations. And we help people either get job placements in other companies or to start their own business or join small businesses as well. Next. So those were some of the collaborations, just to give you an idea of the kind of initiatives that are taking place. But there's also been a lot of work done on the supply side of things. the ILO has really been championing the cause to really include disability inclusion as far as technical education is concerned. So the Department of Technical Education, which has about 118 vocational training institutes, they all now have disability inclusion as part of their plan and their budget and their performance systems. There's also been a lot of extensive training given to these institutes at the senior level to ensure that disability inclusion becomes a part of their culture and is really results in greater enrollment of people with disabilities. And the Ministry of Education as well a few years ago set a target of, a quota rather, of 5% enrollment of people with disabilities in these technical vocational training institutes. And for the first time, a cross-ministry disability inclusion advisory group has been formed. And these are ministries that work on employment primarily. Next. So about a year ago, we learned about a lot of these things, myself and Kishore Singh from the ILO Dhaka office. We were here and we got really inspired by the network meeting last year, and we were thinking, you know, it's great, Interfab is doing their project, AK Khan, we're doing our thing, and a lot of interesting supply-side initiatives have been happening. But what about if we bring it all together, similar to what GBDN is looking to do, but more on a national level? And we found that there was a lot of keen interest to make this happen. We initially approached the Bangladesh Employers Federation, who agreed to promote the cause and to help to fast-track the implementation of the network, following which we had a lot of workshops that included employers from various industries, from banking, manufacturing, tourism, the ready-made garments industry, as well as NGOs, disabled people's organizations, and international agencies such as ILO and the GIZ, which is the German development agency. And in the architecture of our network, we have made it such that both the demand side and supply side are represented from the start, because we need to work very closely together to ensure that that equilibrium is reached as we move forward. And we're, of course, working to raise a lot of awareness about the issue, engage in advocacy, and also lobby with the government, because sometimes policies are put in place, commitments are made, but to ensure that these are actually implemented with, I think, the backing of the private sector, the NGO sector, and the international agencies, it creates this very strong lobbying force, which we hope to utilize. And I'm happy to share that this December we'll be officially, formally launching the network at the Dhaka Skills Summit, which will be attended by the DG of the ILO, as well as the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who will officially declare the launch of the network. And we hope this will really give us the kind of springboard that's needed to make Bangladesh a more inclusive society.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's really, really encouraging. I just didn't think it was going to fall.
And lots of wishes for the new network.
Thank you.
Now we have a last speaker for this roundtable with Hervé Bernard, who's the head of Technical Unit Inclusion at Handicap International. Hervé, the floor is yours before the question and answer session.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you to give me the floor for a very quick presentation. I would like to focus on three priorities in terms of partnership through one event that will happen also in December, but not in Bangladesh, but in Washington, D.C. I want to insist on three aspects of collaboration: the North and South collaboration, to be sure that we don't forget developing countries and all the things that are happening in low and middle income countries in terms of employment of people with disabilities. I want to insist on a second aspect of collaboration is between business and civil society. It could be NGO, could be whatever social civil society that exists, disability person organization that exists in the field. And the second aspect of the last aspect of collaboration is collaboration with politicians. And for that, I will take the example of one important politician in America called the Senator Harkin. He's one of the fathers of the American Disability Act. He's now retired, and he wants to continue to do to collaborate and to really bring additional collaboration on disability and employment. And he decided to create a summit that should be annual to talk about disability employment in the world. And we managed to collaborate with him to say, okay, that's a great idea, but don't talk only of a US organization or European organization or Australian one or Japanese one. Try to really focus globally and to include the concern of people with disability and to small, medium income country and little enterprises as well. So he get committed to this idea, and we are now running to this to open the first conference in 8 and 9 of December in USA in Washington, and hopefully it will be an annual one where we'll have the opportunity to raise the global perspective of employment of people with disability worldwide. So I just want to give you a little perspective of this conference and to see how we can, as a GBDN and all the members in this room, try to participate in one way or another to this kind of events that hopefully will happen more and more. Next slide, please. So the objective of this summit is really now to increase the productive and dignified employment of people with disability around the world. So we managed to push the agenda to this notion of employment around the world, but with this notion of productive and dignified aspect, because I will come back to that later. It's all about decent work again. We want to use this event to link international leaders to be sure that there are other rooms than the GBDN. GBDN is a very important network, but we are mainly among ourselves in the north. So how can we also include more systematically people from the south that have a very nice experience from middle enterprises. We want to identify strategies that works, and we want to also honor or celebrate the different success in innovating approaches. And hopefully that will help to fill the gap between employers and people with disability looking for a job. Next one. Just very quickly, just to show you that we are already a lot of enterprise that are committed. They are mainly US enterprise, so hopefully they will maybe become future members of GBDN in the future. And I know that Stefan, you are trying to raise more US organizations, so maybe the Ford Foundation, Walmart, I don't know, Walgreens, Boots, maybe will be part, Microsoft, maybe one day will be in this room in Geneva to explain what are they doing in USA and also abroad. And we have also a lot of universities and US organizations committed, but we want this committee to get more and more international for the future edition of this event. Next one. We have decided to produce a white paper in order to raise the voice of people with disability from the South and to be sure that they are at the agenda of this conference. We have been working as Handicap International in 24 developing countries on livelihood. We are working in 55 countries, but among these 55, 24 of them we have livelihood, employment activity for people with disability. And we wanted to learn and to give the voice to our team and our partners in the field to bring this voice to this conference and to be sure that we also talk about Morocco, we talk about Bangladesh or Philippines or Bolivia or Madagascar in this important event. So, next slide. The purpose of this white paper is to investigate the status of wage employment in these different countries and to use the different experiences we have so far and also to give opportunities to our partners to explain their main focus and their main issues to succeed. Next slide. So we did some literature review. We organized some qualitative survey and workshop with our partners in different situations, and we try also to analyze the whole process from someone out of job to someone who is maintaining his job and is able to succeed and maybe progress in the job. So we have seen the different barriers, and we organize 1 day, 2 days workshop in different 24 countries to be sure that people have the occasion to express their main concerns. Next slide. So main findings so far, and the document will be published for the conference, but I wanted to share a little bit of findings that we have already identified, that No surprise, people with disability often do not have access to real decent work. We use a decent work definition to analyze and to question our partners whether they consider that people have a real decent work, and we have identified three main issues. It's about freedom to choose. Many people with disability said that they are not free to choose their job and they have obligation to go on this one. It's about stereotype as well. How can we fight that? It's about productive work, a big issue regarding how can we make a living out of your job. And dignity at work also very often came as an issue, and also all the issue regarding violence at work. It's something that is a taboo for many people, but it's something that exists, and we have many testimony of that during these different workshops. All the country almost ratified the CRPD, so no surprise, but in fact none of the country more or less get to operational legislation or plan of action. So there's still lots of work to do to be sure that we go much broader and much further than just the ratification of the CRPD. Next slide, please. We identify some leaders and some good example who are the ones who are hiring people with disabilities. The service sector definitely is very active in that. We have identified some multinationals, and some are in this room, like BNP Paribas in Senegal or L'Oréal in Morocco, but we have also AXA, Orange, that are also very active in the country where we are, like the same country, the Francophone part, let's say, of Africa. And we can see the importance of the CSR, the corporate social responsibility, as a motor to facilitate linkages between these big corporates that have, as you presented or during all day, nice and very effective policy in the north, but sometimes are struggling to push their branches in the south to have the same dynamic and the same capacities. And we identified that public government was also one of the main recruiter of people with disability, with all the question of dignity and productive work very often. Next slide, maybe. We have identified some recommendation. Let's work on shifting national policies to action plan based on inclusive employment, to be sure that we are really fitting with the vision that of an inclusive world, and not reinforce the shelter workshop that exists and that are important sometimes to prepare people. Quotas exist a lot. All of the countries that we have identified are more or less working with quota or are thinking to develop quotas, but without financial incentive, without all the machine behind that can make quota sometimes successful. I know it's a debate, but at least we cannot change the fact that many countries are going to quotas. So what can we do to be sure that it's part of the future success for employment? And there's a real lack of comparative and analyze of the different policies worldwide. It's very difficult to be able to advise a government or a civil society in terms of what should be the right policy, because there's a complete absence of comparison and real debate around this topic. In terms of practice, and I will finish with that, Bruce, don't worry, we have to focus on access to basic services. Many of you mentioned this notion of education, basic education, vocational training skills, so that's definitely one clear demand. Increase adapted and business-oriented vocational training opportunities. We know that most of the time they are not adapted and they are not business-oriented. And we have to reinforce the partnership between companies, enterprises, and organizations from the civil society to be sure that each of us, we feed each other, and we have the capacity in the long run to work together and to achieve this important goal of employment of people with disability. Last slide, just pictures. Thank you, and I hope that it will help to raise some question during this next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Hervé. Just as a little information, the Global Business and Disability Network welcomes employers federations from a national perspective to represent smaller and medium-sized companies. And we're trying to keep a balance, but it has to come from those kind of reunions, of meetings where we can discuss that further. Now is time for question and answers. Please raise your hands and light your micro if you want to address someone specifically from the panel, or ask everybody what they think. Who starts? You at the end.
Yeah. Very interesting. Congratulations to Bangladesh. I mean, the developing countries, we have to work more, to include people, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because people have to keep themselves. So great effort from the partnership between companies and government, and yes, way to go. I'd like to know more about this. I wanted to talk about the convention. Lots of countries have ratified, and there's an article again that's awareness raising, that everybody is totally, it's transparent. People just don't notice it, and it's actually an umbrella, because if you don't see people with disabilities, you don't, think that they have to be included. And advocacy has to happen there too. And if you go to the advertising agencies and to the companies, they don't have anything against people with disabilities being in marketing. And actually, inclusive marketing is part of building trust with disability stakeholders and inclusive corporate culture. I had to read that. We have some examples in Australia. I don't know if you saw it. Kmart and Target are using models with disabilities in catalogs and advertising, and not only with disabilities. There a recent spot on TV of a young boy playing with a doll. So it's all diversity, and we should really think more about that. Thank you.
Who wants to give an answer? Susan?
Just one observation is that most people with disabilities have non-visible impairments. And so, in most companies, you will have 10 to 12% of the workforce now will have a disability. 1 in 3 50 to 64-year-olds will have a disability. Members of the corporate board will have disabilities, but they wouldn't dream of saying it because they're so senior and successful. I knew a board member once. He was deaf on a bank, and he was known as the man who brought his secretary with him. He hadn't told anyone he was deaf. He didn't say anything until the break. She told him what was going on. He then leaned over and said something, and because he hardly ever spoke, everyone went, wow, we have to pay attention to George. My point being, I think we need to realize that we're asking corporations to manage people they already have more effectively, and they learn from that. And it opens your mind as to who's really disabled. And so in countries with quotas, because the quota message is the only real disabled people are the ones who, say in Germany, have a 50% deficient thing from a doctor, it means that the graduate with dyslexia isn't regarded as disabled. And so there's no feeling that they should be reducing the obstacles that prevent that individual from doing a great job or just getting the job in the first place. It's when you start to look at your own workforce and say, who here would find it easier to do their job if we had the disability expertise we need to make adjustments for people as they get older and they hate the stairs, they can't read the small print, and their phones aren't working so well, etc. You focus on the disability expertise question in the company, and then they start to shift their picture of who is disabled, and they start to talk directly to disabled individuals, and you end up in a very different place. But let's not forget, most people with disabilities have non-visible impairments. And until we create the culture change we're talking about, they're not going to confess, if you like. They don't tell you because they're not sure what kind of reaction they're going to get. And it's a real problem in marketing. What do? They have to have a dog, a white stick, a chair, a parrot on their shoulder.
Yes?
I just like to pick up the discussion that Susan has. And perhaps to Matilda, you talked about 3 solutions that in your company that you have implemented. That's technical, organizational, and scheduling. And what has been the role of persons with disability who is your staff in developing these solutions? vis-a-vis the discussion that Susan has. What has been the role of persons with disability, your staff with disability, in developing those 3 solutions that you discussed about? That is technical, organizational, and scheduling.
The thing is, on this respect, we have to work very closely with the disabled people, and actually, there is the role of the person within the store in charge of the disability program has to speak to the person, has to speak to the manager, has to, and so that the employee feels confident and knows that the company will do all what she can do to retain and to adapt and to find a solution. Then she also, the person who acquires maybe a disability or who has also to of course, it is a local, very close sharing, discussion, and so that the person who acquires a disability feels confident and knows that the company and the manager will not let him or her on the side of the company. So, well, I don't know if I answer your question.
Perhaps I'd like to have a perspective of Susan in this, because if I understand Susan's comments, is that it's about having persons with disability, plastic company developing these solutions. So the question is, what kind of space do you give those people to suggest the solutions that the company actually employs? That's the notion that I don't get.
Can I give an example of how we deal with that at Lynn & Cheshire Disability? Because we're also an employer and we do employ people with disabilities. So one of the ways that we've dealt with that under our HR procedures has been, in a very practical term, it falls down to the manager to have a conversation with the employee directly to understand what the needs are. So I do have a person with dyslexia in my team. First day on the job, we sat down and we have a conversation. And I came very, straightforward, and I asked her, you have disclosed that you have dyslexia in your recruitment process. That's absolutely fine. I personally had never worked with someone with dyslexia, at least that I had known about. I might have, but I didn't know about it. And I was very honest. I don't know exactly what it is that me as your manager or what the rest of the team can do to accommodate some of your needs, if there are any, what should be aware of. And it's a very simple, and I don't mean to oversimplify it, but it's actually a quite simple, straightforward conversation, to which she responded, these are the top 3 things that I'd like for you to take into consideration when we're in meetings, when you're assessing my performance, or when you're asking me for specific tasks. So I think that from a company perspective, or from an organization perspective, the guidance that Lynn & Cheshire gives all of its managers is that as you are going through that induction process, this is an area that you need to cover. There are other guidance on assistive devices, on reasonable accommodation that that goes beyond adjusting processes in the way that you work on a daily basis, and then there's access to budgets and different sorts of things. But at the end of the day, I think it boils down to the line manager, because each individual will require different things, and it's really hard for us to simply say, especially with identifying and addressing what Susan was mentioning about invisible disabilities. We keep on talking about assistive devices that will address physical needs, but not necessarily every other type of need. And even within that space, each individual will require different things. So I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all solution.
Can I come back on that? We say that best practice requires you to remove obstacles for groups and adjust for individuals. And I think you've been talking about how you make a system work around an individual. I think your question was, how do you talk to disabled colleagues to find out what obstacles in the system for groups are getting in the way? A classic for me on dyslexia, global companies saying, we won't allow you to personalize your screen. So if I need it to be blue because that helps with my dyslexia, she, as CIO, was saying, no way. You know, it's just too complicated. We're a big global company. And so if you can't get permission to personalize your screen, the individual adjustment becomes probably impossible. And you end up then, you know, going around the houses a lot. The two have to come together, removing obstacles for groups and adjusting for individuals. And disabled employee groups are proving to be hugely useful in terms of spotting the systemic issues.
I saw a question from Stefan.
Well, it's not really a question, it's more two comments. First, I would like really to congratulate Murteza for the work that is being done in Bangladesh. And I must say, I was also very impressed. I didn't know about the very interesting collaboration between Lena Cheshire and Accenture. I think you've shown also the way in which, how we can organize collaboration between NGOs and companies, and I think it's something that we need to think about how to replicate in more places. No? So I think, because I think it's very important, and we discussed it this morning, that the reality in developing countries and the reality in OECD countries is very different. No? I mean, I fully agree with Susan that already in large companies there is a significant group of people with disabilities. No? But it's also true that, especially in developing countries, the majority of people with significant disabilities are outside of the labor market. No? And while companies can learn from their internal staff with disabilities, if they are identified and they are used through employee resource groups and all that, we still have a huge challenge in terms of getting people with disabilities into the companies. No? And I think that has been very strongly the focus of our network up to now. And I think what we tried to achieve also with Carrefour's presentation is to remember that companies not only need to get people with disabilities into the labor market or into their companies, but also those people that acquire disability or whose disability gets worse while they are being employed, that we also cover with them. And because sometimes there's this trend of disability management, there's a whole school of disability management, which basically only is concerned about people who are already employed and who acquire disability for whatever reasons. No? And this school of thought forgets completely about people with disabilities that are outside the labor market. No? And I think there are clear overlaps and complementarities between both approaches, but very often they are separate worlds, that's separate conferences, separate events, and I think we're trying to find ways through which to remind everybody that that these two worlds need to come together, that when we speak about reasonable workplace adjustments, they apply to people that are being employed newly with a disability as well as people that acquire a disability. So I think we still have to make more efforts in terms of bringing those two narratives together, and that was the first attempt today when we asked Matilda not so much talk about how Carrefour gets new people in, where they do a great job, but also what do you do as Carrefour for people that are already employed that acquire a disability. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reaction? Fine. There was another question from Mr. on the front.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for Alessandro. Is the Cheshire Homes, Leonard Cheshire Homes, is it the same as the Catholic, the one that is supported by the Catholic Church? Because in Zambia, we do have the Cheshire Homes that has been supporting people with disabilities for many, many decades. So I just wanted to understand also the model, how it works out with Accenture.
So Leonard Cheshire Disability is a UK-based organization which is a part of a global alliance of Cheshires. So we are a network of independent organizations. The Zambia Cheshire Homes is one of them. So we're part of a network with the same ethos and the focus of representing and supporting persons with disabilities across the globe. So the alliance is across 54 countries. And then each individual member of the alliance actually has the independence to work and partner with whoever they believe is the right partner in country. It's the same as the UK-based organization. So currently, through our partnership with Accenture, we do not work in Zambia, but in the other countries where we operate, we do implement things on the ground via some of the Cheshire Homes and via other local civil society and DPO organizations.
Okay. Yeah.
I can probably explain that a little bit better because it can be slightly confusing because although we share the name and the brand. We are independent organizations that are a part of a bigger network.
I think it's something that we can try and replicate in
Yeah,
Zambia. Yeah, so we can pick it up offline with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, remarks? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you for your respected panelists. Actually, my question is to Stefan or Adam Green. Is it possible for the ILO to leverage this idea to create a portal that has access to subject matter experts on their personal capacity, not their official capacity, suppliers of assistive technology, for example, so that will help developing countries to get the subject matter experts, or fast-track the maturity of persons with disability inclusion faster than the traditional work? I don't know if this is possible to leverage or not. Thank you.
Well, we have to get Google in. It's really part of the ambition of the network to propose useful toolkits and solutions for the the members of the network. It's difficult to build and to keep on track because it's moving fast. Everything is moving fast. So, of course, we will be able to provide with the right connections, but it goes through a human filter in the end. It's really part of the philosophy also to keep a link, a human link, and added value accordingly to the needs of the members. But Mathilde, maybe you would like to say something? Fine. Other questions? Fine. So I'll go through my conclusions for this part. So the demonstration is as obvious as an elephant in the room. The cooperation works, and it's worth trying it. And whatever the format, the partnerships, they will build innovation, trust between actors. They will drive the scale change and the appropriation of the relationship between those trying to go beyond their agenda on inclusion of people with disabilities and the people with disabilities themselves. So as a word, it could be together is better. So try, and that was really part of the philosophy of the various actors that we had today on this not so round table. So I would like to thank everybody for their participation. If you have one closing word, it's possible, just like for other session. One wish, maybe for further action. Would you? Yeah?
Well, I'd say if there's any representative from a country here who doesn't have a network, it's very possible to do within a short span of time. I'm sure you'll see there's a lot of people eager to work on this cause, so I encourage you to explore it if you have not already.
And I guess I'm thinking the more business leaders are talking to disabled people as individuals directly, we'll start to see real progress here. And so I'd be suggesting to any corporate, start to count the number of times you've brought people with disabilities in as expert advisors, as over breakfasts, over parties. Our parties with a purpose were quite famous in the UK. And sort of avoid the assumption that you have to be talking institution to institution. We want human beings talking together to understand the journeys real people are taking as they're trying to get in, and do their jobs, and buy stuff.
Yeah, maybe I can just add one element I have in mind from this morning is about the invisibility aspect of some people's ability and the disclosure aspect, how people can really express that they are disabled or not as a choice, and they can have to say no, I don't want to express that. And I think it's I would make some connection with what the Washington group is doing. It's a group on support with WHO to try to help government and national census to identify people's disability, and at the end they come with some questionnaire which is not about disability, which is about difficulties to do some activities and about abilities to do very simple activities like climbing stairs, like hearing, like seeing. And I think it is this notion of difficulties, this culture of abilities and difficulties that maybe we have to build within our different enterprises when we want to avoid going straight to are you disabled or not, which is definitely not the solution. But the notion of difficulties and how we can help people to fulfill with their job requirement without difficulties, that maybe is a kind of culture that we have to bring.
I think I'll just complement a bit of Susan's point, which is very much about, yeah, we need to be talking to people with disabilities directly if we want to get the correct answers. I think if sometimes business struggle with identifying or knowing where these people are, if you can't find them within your own business, I think that that's where, it's a good place to start collaboration with either DPOs or local NGOs who will then have access to disabled people directly. And whether they are part of your business or not, they can still, you can still have that discussion.
I would say to find individual and adapted solutions to people who acquire a disability during their work life, and to ensure that they remain included in the workforce, and to help them to continue their job and progress within the company.
Yes, I would just say establish internships. I really cannot say enough about the good outcomes we see from that. And if you want young interns who are eager HR professionals to help you with that, we have 200 who go out for internships for semester longs, and we will help equip them with the information you need to establish the internships while they're interns with you as young HR professionals. So use that resource.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for the fruitful discussion. And now we will be leading to the final remarks session. I will. And I will welcome Shona. Yeah. Sorry for. It was not meant to be rude. It was fun. Just. Okay, so I will start a very short, because it's been a long day, final remarks, closing remarks session. I think this long day has been fruitful, and having lived the previous sessions, I must say, and I shared that with Mathilde a bit earlier today, I think we went one step further, which is very interesting in terms of our business background. For the network, I think looking at the future is getting out of the disability itself to consider the individualities, whether they are experiencing a disability or whether they are looking at the difference from the other side. Strong messages were delivered on abilities, plural. On normality, I heard I recorded the normality versus superheroes or versus miserabilism on the other end. People with disabilities, they deserve just equal treatment, and they request just normal inclusion within a company. And we have to consider this. We also had strong messages on empowerment, and I think this is the good news for the future. Now I think we are trying to outpass the barrier of correction, and we are on the way to do better No, I think it's one good message that I heard today. And on the new tracks, we had the future of work a bit earlier, and I think it's interesting that everybody is part of the adventure. On the challenging stigma and stereotype session, I think we have some good hints and some very clever examples that everybody is an actor of that. And on the partnership, as you just heard, we are stronger together. So I think there is no barrier between different types of organizations, and if we pursue a same target, we can have a higher target together. And that was really something interesting. So as a vice chair of the Global Business and Disability Network, I want to thank you for this day of fruitful discussion, for your commitment within the network, and I know that we will have some further milestones within the next few months, and I wish to see you again within the next month and next year too. Shona, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bruce. Just a few comments from the ILO side. It's certainly been an interesting day, actually 2 days. We started yesterday with the discussion on mental health, which was fascinating, and I think looking at things from a different perspective, which was extremely helpful. What I like about the Global Business and Disability Network is for the ILO, it's something very unique, and I think it's unique internationally, even outside the ILO, bringing together unique partnerships and knowledge sharing. And today was a very rich sharing of knowledge and experiences and ideas. And I think it gets people thinking too about, well, what else can we do? How much further can we go? And you talked about that a little bit, Bruce. We're going further, another level. And I think that's really exciting. So seeing how important it is to engage businesses, business networks, and other organizations working to promote employment inclusive of persons with disabilities is extremely important, and I think this network shows that. This network also complements a range of other actions from the ILO, and you've heard about some of them today. You've heard about the future of work, and I think it's exciting that we have a Future of Work Centenary Initiative as we come up to our 100th anniversary for the ILO, being the oldest organization in the UN family. But then there's expectations as well. We have a big initiative saying we're going to look at the future of work, we're going to put lots into that, we're going to have a big global commission. So there are high expectations. And what we have to make sure is that the future of work is inclusive of everyone, in particular people with disabilities. We also have the Women at Work Centenary Initiative, and that looks at why women haven't done so well in the world of work, which we look back over a number of years and we see that the gender gaps between men and women have closed very little. So I think we need to look at that intersection between disability and gender as well, because there's a big gender component there when we look at the future of work. So I think that will be very important moving forward. We also last week had an expert meeting on violence against women and men in the world of work. And this is actually to prepare a standard-setting discussion in our conference in 2018. Now, the possibility is that in 2018, and moving on to 2019 to 2020 for a second discussion, we could have an international treaty on violence in the world of work. And I think that would be very exciting. That would certainly be a game changer in terms of that issue. Well, there's clearly a gender dimension to that. There's also a dimension around people with disabilities. And it was interesting in the discussion yesterday on mental health, there was a lot of discussion about psychosocial risks and the importance of the working environment. And these are very similar conversations to what we had last week in the expert meeting on violence. So I think seeing how those different issues link together is going to be really important as we move forward. Now, it's been exciting to see the network grow, and we saw a visible manifestation of that growth this morning with 2 new signatories of the Charter. So there are now 17. So I think that's pretty exciting. When we all sat here a few years ago, it was just starting. The seeds were being sown, and I think they're really blossoming. And I think you should all be really proud of what's happened. We also have 4 non-company members that have joined, but as some of them have pointed out, they employ people too. So it's important for them to have policies and to be able to work within their own organizations. And I think we say that about the ILO as well. It's fine to be giving people advice, but we need to start taking some of that as advice as well. So I actually like that point that we're not just NGOs, we actually employ people. So I think that's important to remember. The network's had many activities this year, and I think it's been really interesting to have the high-level meeting that took place in Paris earlier in the year, and the 2 working groups that have been very active on mental health and on stigma and stereotypes. And again, we're moving to the next level on those, as Bruce mentioned. And as I said, yesterday's meeting on mental health, I think, was really interesting. There was a lot of innovative thinking, some great work going on, some tools that people didn't know about, and I think enormous scope for replication. Now this afternoon, stigma and stereotypes, which you talked about, we see how they restrict the chances of people with disabilities. And we also see that there are innovative approaches that can be taken. We also looked at partnerships. And again, I think it's really important to look at the practical change that partnerships can bring. Sometimes we're very isolated in the work we do and the objectives that we want to pursue. And when we do it in partnership, we can actually work in a better way, and we can move forward in a more productive way. And I think that really came out this afternoon too in the discussion. So, one wish for future action. I like that. What's my wish, and what do I think is the way forward from an ILO perspective, is a strengthened and growing global business and disability network, which lets us work together to tackle challenges and ensure the future of work is inclusive for everyone. So leaving you with that wish, and wishing you all safe travels, just to thank the ILO team headed by Stefan, who has worked tirelessly to make this happen, as well as all the other people who came from afar to be here to share their ideas and their knowledge. And hopefully we'll see each other again same time next year.
We also have to thank the sign language interpretation and the script, because it was really a live interpretation, and it was quality interpretation. Thank you everyone, and see you soon.